Welcome back, besties. Grab your yarn, your cards, and your emotional support beverage of choice. No judgments here if you drop a little nip inside. Quick weekly check-in before we get into everything. My training is still ongoing. I added a couple pounds to the weights, and now my arms are not happy. But my abs are feeling better. So I figure as long as I don't get them mad at the same time that they decide to, form a union and go on strike, I'm good to go. For my kids, their new semester has officially started. So for the most part, it's just been that familiar day-to-day grind with a heavy garnish of what the actual fuck is happening in the world right now. You know the vibe. Life is lifing, and we are pretty much white knuckling it the entire time. And somewhere between schedules, obligations, and doom scrolling, I ended up writing a poem this week. Not because I'm suddenly mysterious and artistic, but because sometimes your brain gets what I call a word itch, and you need an outlet that's not screaming into the void or yelling at the TV. Writing was cheaper than an emergency therapy that day, ironically. Which brings us here. Let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever wondered what actually happens in therapy beyond the Instagram glow up? You know, the soft lighting, inspirational quotes, my therapist healed my inner child captions. Don't get me wrong, I love that for them. Truly. But that's not the whole story. And it's definitely not what it feels like in the beginning. So today I want to talk about therapy unfiltered. The good stuff, but also the uncomfortable stuff. The moments that help and the moments that make you sit there and think, am I doing this right? Why am I doing this? We're also going to get into the stigma around mental health care, why it still exists, why it's utter bullshit, usually coming from people who probably need it and won't admit it, and why so many people are still afraid to talk about it, honestly. This is not going to be preachy, and as always, I'm not polished. It's honest, funny where it can be, and as always, rooted in my real life, not a highlight reel. I'll be talking about my own journey, along with generalizations of what people tend to experience. Because just like coffee, everybody takes their therapy a little bit differently. So if you've ever been curious about therapy, skeptical of it, in it, avoiding it, or just kind of tired of pretending mental health is like a cute side handbag, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. So let's start with the good stuff. Because yes, therapy can actually be really good. Like, okay, maybe this is working good. Sometimes you don't even realize like how heavy that load was that you were carrying until you're not carrying it anymore. There are moments in therapy where it clicks. You're mid-sentence, rambling, if you're like me. And suddenly your therapist says one thing, one sentence, and your brain just stops. And it goes, oh, that's why I do that. Or why I think that way. It's not fireworks or singing angels. It's quieter than that. It's clarity. And honestly, that clarity can feel life changing. One of the biggest highs for me, and for a lot of people, is simply feeling heard. Like truly heard. Not the, yeah, that sounds hard, heard. Because, the other person is just waiting for their turn to talk. But validated in a way that makes you feel less crazy or how you react, feel, or cope. Having someone sit with your thoughts without trying to fix you immediately or one up your trauma is rare. And listen, I know, I've done it. Someone's talking to me, they're sharing something really important, and I think I have information that will help them. So I'm just waiting to say it before I probably forget it. But I'm not really listening to them in that moment. I am just waiting for my turn to talk. But having someone that actually listens, that's weirdly powerful. With my kids, I had talked to their pediatrician about one time, and she said something she had learned in a conference that I have adopted for my kids. When they come to you, it's the Triple H. Do you want to be heard? Do you want to be helped? Or do you want to be hugged? Do what you will with that. But I think that that kind of helps. Anyway, and then there's just moments, which longtime listeners know. I love a small win, and I don't think they get nearly enough credit. Maybe you set a boundary without spiraling afterwards. Maybe you caught yourself in a negative thought pattern and didn't let it hijack your entire day. Maybe you responded instead of reacted. And yes, I know it sounds weird, but there is actually a difference. Those aren't dramatic moments, but they quietly change your everyday life and sometimes how you see other people. But this is also where I want to clear up a huge misconception. Therapy isn't just venting. Yes, sometimes you need to vent. Sometimes you need to cry. And sometimes you just need to get it all out while there's no kids calling your name, the phone's not ringing, and the oven isn't going off. Sometimes you need to say the same thing out loud for 3 weeks in a row until it finally loses its grip on you. But good therapy doesn't just stop there. There's actual work happening. And yes, it often comes in the form of homework, which that in itself kind of forces you to learn how to insert self-care into your day. But tools, strategies, pattern recognition, you learning how your brain works, why certain things trigger you, and what you can do differently the next time. Therapy is not always about removing the triggers. It can be about changing how you react to them. And that's growth, not just, emotionally dumping. So yeah, therapy at its best can be empowering. It can make you feel grounded, capable, and more in control of your own narrative. And that's the high people don't always talk about. Not the glow up, but the quiet confidence that builds when you start understanding yourself better and learning how to control how you react. All right, time for our humorous personal story of the week. This one happened a couple years ago. We had just gotten home from vacation, and my younger brother, who took care of our old dog Mondo while we were gone, let me know that he thought he saw a skunk in our yard. I was pretty sure. So the next day, after everything's unpacked and all that, I decided to take my boys and throw them in the swimming pool. And my husband was going to get the mower out to cut the jungle that had grown while we were gone. Him and the dog were opening the shed, and I yelled from the pool because, that's my job. Don't forget, my brother thought he saw a skunk while we were gone. And my husband, being all husbandly, waves me off. So while I had filed this under important information, he had filed it under maybe pay attention to. 2 minutes later, I hear barking. And then I hear, "No, Mondo," being yelled. I climb out of the pool just in time to see Mondo had the skunk cornered up against the shed. And the skunk in his defense, fearing for his actual life, is just spraying the dog down into the dog's mouth, all over the dog's face, and all over my husband's arm, which is desperately trying to pull Mondo away. I yell, "I told you my brother saw a skunk." To which my husband replies, "You said he thought he saw a skunk." Well, play stupid games, get stupid prizes. I left him in charge of bathing the stink off the dog, figuring out how to get the smell out of the dog's mouth, all by himself, while I went back to sunning in the pool. Okay, now that we've hyped up all the good stuff, let's get into the honest nitty-gritty. Therapy is not all sunshine, roses, and candy-shitting unicorns. Yes, breakthroughs and clarity and wow, I feel amazing moments do happen. Some sessions are just rough, and not in a productive, cathartic way, just ugh. I feel like I ran a marathon carrying a toddler and wet cat. There are sessions where you feel stuck. Like you're talking in circles. You're revisiting the same issue for the 10th time. And you're wondering, am I completely broken because I haven't moved past this yet? You start thinking, didn't we already talk about this? Why am I still here talking about this? Am I like doing therapy wrong? And this part's important. Healing is not linear. When you spend years ignoring things or using unhealthy coping mechanisms, your brain builds like a muscle memory around that. So you're potentially trying to undo years of dark thoughts or trauma. You're not going to fix that in 1/18th of the time it took to create it. And then there's the emotional hangover. You walk into therapy feeling fine, maybe even productive. And you leave feeling emotionally exhausted, confused, or oddly raw. Like someone shook up your brain and said, "Okay, see you next week." That part doesn't really get advertised in the flyers. The post-therapy crash where you don't even want to think about what to cook for dinner because your brain has fully checked out. This is where the myth versus reality conversation really needs to happen. Not every session is a revelation. Some weeks you don't uncover a core memory. You don't have a big aha. Sometimes the biggest win is just showing up and talking through something messy without spiraling. And yeah, it can kind of feel anticlimactic when you're expecting growth to look dramatic. Another frustration, finding the right therapist and building trust. Because let's be real, that process is awkward as hell. First sessions feel kind of like speed dating, except you're trauma dumping instead of talking about hobbies. You're kind of sitting there like, do I like them? Do they get me? Am I oversharing? Am I undersharing? Think of people like a spigot. Sometimes you turn the knob, and it's what I like to call mouth vomit. I'm a mouth vomiter. Other people, you turn the spigot, and it's tiny little drips. Either way, it affects how fast or slow you can move through the process. They can't help if they don't know the problem. And sometimes it takes a long time to trust someone enough to tell them all your problems. And sometimes it's just not a match. It doesn't mean therapy doesn't work. It means humans are humans. And not every therapist is a right fit for every person. And unfortunately, that can mean trial and error. And yeah, a few uncomfortable first meetings before it clicks. So if therapy has ever left you frustrated, tired, or questioning the process, you're not failing. You're experiencing the reality of it. Growth isn't linear. Healing isn't pretty. And sometimes the lows are just part of the work. All right, let's get into Bruise News. It's a little heavy this week. So let's start with the Epstein files. Because as I've said before, this story only dies when we let it. There's really not too much of an update. The Department of Justice is now past the legal deadline that was set by the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which required a full release of Epstein-related documents by December 19th, 2025. Under the law, the DOJ was also required to provide Congress with a list of every government official or politically exposed person who's named in the files, along with a justification for every single redaction. Lawmakers from both parties say the DOJ is not in compliance. Only a small portion of the documents have been released, and Congress still has not received the required list of officials. The DOJ cites the sheer volume. At this point, they say more than 2 million documents, but there's been back and forth about how many documents there actually are, and has offered no timeline for the full release. The result is another missed deadline, another transparency failure, growing bipartisan frustration, and victims still not getting the justice they want. Before we move on, I want to acknowledge this next part's heavy. I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to broach the subject, but just like with Epstein, I think the focus needs to stay on the victim, not the headlines. 2025 was the deadliest year in ICE custody in more than 20 years, with 31 people dying while detained. Reporting shows repeated medical neglect, delayed care, and failures in oversight. In addition to those who died in custody, 2 ICE-related killings have sparked national outrage. Renee Nicole Good, 37, a Minneapolis mother of 3, was shot and killed by an ICE agent during an enforcement operation on January 7th, 2026. Keith Porter Jr., 43, the father of 2, was shot and killed by an off-duty ICE agent in Los Angeles on December 31st, 2025. Both deaths have led to vigils, protests, and renewed calls for accountability. Now, I'm going to take some time, and I'm probably going to butcher these, but I'm going to say their names. Because sometimes it's easy to numb yourself when they're just a statistic, a number. But they're not. They were people who had people that loved them. Jose de Jesus Garcia, Juan Carlos Martinez, Luis Alberto Hernandez, Carlos Eduardo Gomez, Miguel Angel Torres, Rafael Antonio Lopez, Marvin Alexander Reyes, Wilmer Adone Perez, Jose Angel Castillo, Jorge Luis Ramirez, Edwin Orlando Lopez, Samuel David Hernandez, Jose Manuel Perez, Luis Fernando Castiello, Carlos Alberto Ramirez, Juan Manuel Lopez, Miguel Angel Hernandez, Jose Antonio Ramirez, Rafael Eduardo Castiello, Wilmer Alexander Lopez, Marvin David Perez, Jorge Eduardo Castiello, Luis Angel Ramirez, Carlos David Hernandez, Miguel Eduardo Lopez, Juan David Castillo, Jose Luis Ramirez, Rafael Angel Perez, Samuel Eduardo Castillo, Edwin David Ramirez, and one unidentified detainee whose name ICE has withheld. These names and the 2 people killed by ICE agent deserve to be spoken out loud. This is the human cost of policy enforcement and neglect. So please keep saying their names. So let's talk about the stigma. Because despite all the progress that we've made, a lot of people still hesitate to even consider therapy, or even worse, they kind of use it as a running gag. And it's usually not because they don't need it. It's because they've been taught that it's a sign of weakness, that they don't realize it takes strength to not only admit you need help, but to actually seek it out. For a lot of people, therapy kind of feels like an admission of failure. Like needing help somehow means you're dramatic, broken. I've heard a drama queen, or that you're just not handling life well enough. There's this unspoken pressure to just push through, tough it out. Or for some people, right away. Especially if you grew up in a culture or household where mental health wasn't something you talked about. It was something you ignored. A lot of stigma about therapy actually ties into generational trauma. This is how it's always been, so it's okay. There are also the social and personal barriers that don't get acknowledged enough. Cost, access, time, bad experiences, or even just not knowing where to start. And that's not to mention the lack of professionals. Sometimes, even if you call somewhere to get therapy, the wait list is like months away. And if you've already internalized shame about needing support, the hurdle feels even higher. It becomes the perfect excuse on why you're not going to do it. One of the easiest ways we can start breaking the stigma is normalizing the conversation. Not in a dramatic, oversharing, mouth vomit way, but in small, everyday moments. Saying things like, my therapist and I talked about this, the same way you'd say, like, my doctor mentioned. One of the things I took away from therapy was when I analyzed where my thoughts were coming from, it was, that's not a reliable source of information. So when I would talk to other people and I would see kind of familiar patterns, I would kind of, be like, well, where did that come from? Well, that's not really a reliable source of information. We need to start talking about mental health like it's part of overall health, because it really is. You can, if you hold things like anxiety in too long, your body will physically be affected. And as I said before, as a parent, this helps you support your kids as they process their emotional growth. The Triple H, Do you need a hug? Do you need heard? Or do you need help? Sometimes I just need heard. And this part matters. Therapy is a tool, not a weakness. It doesn't mean you can't handle life and everything it throws at you, and God knows it throws a lot. It means you're choosing to understand yourself better. This is no different than learning a skill, having a coach, or getting guidance when something feels overwhelming. Look at it this way. If you got to dig a hole, do you want to do it with your bare hands, or would you like a shovel to help ease the burden and make the dig easier? You don't get extra points for struggling alone. You don't get a medal for suffering silently. It's, they say it's not a contest of who dies the most. Well, it's not a contest of who dies with the most mental and emotional scars either. And you definitely don't owe anyone an explanation for how or if you take care of your mental health. If therapy helps you, that's enough. If you're not there yet, that's okay too. The goal isn't perfection, it's process. It's creating a space where people feel safe enough to talk about what they're actually dealing with, one small step, one small win at a time. All right, friends, a lot of heavy stuff today. So now it's time for our magical moment where we take a deep breath and ground ourselves with this week's card. And this week, we've got the star. So picture this. The bottom of the card is a river flowing fast, crashing over rocks like life sometimes does. In the center is a huge glass jar. It's filled about 3/4 of the way with water. Next to it is a child, one hand pressing gently against the glass, while the other sprinkles stars into the jar. The water flows warmly from the stars collecting at the top. Some start drifting down the water, lighting up the bottom. It's peaceful, chaotic, hopeful, all at once. When the star appears upright, it's a card of guidance, hope, and inspiration. It's the light at the end of the tunnel, a gentle reminder that even in the middle of chaos, there's something pure, magical, and restorative to hold on to. Small wins, personal growth, moments where you feel aligned. That's the energy of the star. Reversed, the star can indicate doubt, feeling disconnected from that inner guidance, or struggling to see the light when life's river feels relentless. You might feel like your efforts aren't making a difference, or that clarity is just out of reach. But here's the thing. Even reversed, the star whispers, keep going, keep sprinkling, keep trusting the process, which ties beautifully into our therapy conversation this week. Therapy can be your guiding light, sometimes steady, sometimes flickering, sometimes feeling very far away. But every session, every insight, every small breakthrough adds a little bit of glow and warmth to the jar. And it's helping you navigate the river of life with more ease. So here's your gentle reflection for the week. As always, celebrate the small wins. Take the moments of clarity and let them warm you up. Don't forget self-care, because even a tiny sprinkle of stars in your own jar makes the world a little brighter. All right, my people, let's wrap this up before my third cup of coffee goes cold, and probably before yours does too. Today we covered this full spectrum, the highs, the lows, everything in between. Therapy can bring those aha moments, the breakthroughs that make you feel heard and validated. It can also be frustrating, messy, and exhausting. And through it all, It's still worth it. It's a tool to guide you, not a marker of weakness. So here's your little nudge for the week. Share your story. Laugh at awkward moments. Keep the conversation going. None of us are really in this alone, even though it's been designed to make us feel that way. If you want any more of my rambling, my poem, my articles, you can hop over to my Substack and check out my writings. See what I got a word itch about. You could email me your own Stitch Happen story, which I will read on the air. You can email me at coffeecrochetpodcast@gmail.com. As always, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, review, share, do all the things that the podcast ecosystem likes to push the show forward. And of course, keep your stitches sassy, your coffee strong, and your spirit grounded.